You just need to begin. And your whole next chapter, this whole midlife that we're talking about, this next half of life, it's created through your choices, not your intentions. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to episode 134 of Redefining Midlife. Today, I want to have a heart-to-heart about something that I learned in my own life and something that also comes up a lot in the work that I do with women. And that is the difference between knowing and doing. As always, when I do these solo episodes, I really encourage you to have a pen and paper handy in case there's something that comes up for you and you want to write it down. And also come to this episode with a really curious mind, because I might be saying some things throughout the episode that might get your own thoughts to start racing. So just be curious, notice what comes up, and please don't be judgmental. Don't have those harsh, an opinion of whether things are right or wrong with your thoughts. Just notice, because just noticing is a great way to start to learn more about yourself. I'll start with a quote that I shared during an interview with Ashley Longstaff on her own podcast. And I shared that whole audio in a past episode on Redefining Midlife. The quote was, "We think knowledge is power, but knowledge is only potential power. The real power is when you're putting what you know into action." And like I said, that was something that I said, and I certainly know that I've heard it before from other experts. And I thought, yep, this really does need to be an episode, because so many of us, especially in midlife, are becoming more self-aware. We're noticing things about ourselves. You know, we've also done a lot more things with learning and self-development. We might have read lots of different books. We've probably listened to a wide variety of podcasts. We're interested in these things. We might have saved the inspiring quotes. But for many women, we're still stuck. We're in that same place and it's really hard to move on. We're still waiting. What's going to happen? So I'm going to be talking firstly about the whole illusion of progress, because let's be honest, listening to the podcast, reading all the books, it feels really good to be productive. We feel like we are doing something. We say we're working on ourselves, but are we actually doing the work, or are we just gathering more and more information? So I'm just going to share a time in my own life at the moment to give you an example of what this looked like for me. So if I think back to my own health and wellness story, if I go back maybe 7 or so years ago, 6, 7 years ago, life was pretty crazy. I was living in a different place. I was working in a job I really wasn't enjoying all that much. I had my mum who was very, very unwell at that stage. I had children still at school, another child who was out of school, but, going through the university stage. I was going through the throes of peri. There was lots on my plate. Like, life was busy. Work was pretty stressful as well. And I knew that for me, I wasn't focusing on myself. I was being pulled in lots and lots of different directions. Work, family, there's the responsibilities that go with that, and there's very little time for yourself. And I really did use that as an excuse that I don't have the time. I'll focus and look after myself when I've got the time. But I knew that there were lots of things that I probably could have been doing that wasn't going to take much time at all, that would really move the needle, that would really make me start to feel better. I knew I should have been moving more. I knew I should have probably been eating, more nutritious foods. Everything was okay, but it really was just okay. It could have gone that next step that would be moving the needle. I definitely knew I should have been managing my stress more, and really knew that I should have been saying no. Now, all of those things created, I suppose, a health profile or a wellness profile where I really wasn't operating as well as I could. I was feeling pretty lousy. I was tired, stressed, and just not not looking after myself as well as I could have. But I knew what I should have done. I knew all the steps that I could have done to live well, but I still wasn't living well. And I came to the realization that knowing doesn't change your life, doing does. And I knew that, there's another old saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So it was up to me to take that responsibility to put what I knew into action and just do one little step at a time. And once I've got that step and added that, I could start to think about what else I could do in another area of my wellness. And all of that over time completely transformed to how I feel, and also on the lab results, very different picture to what it was 7 years ago. So I'm actually healthier than I was 7 years ago. And you usually start to think, all right, as you get older, things are going to get worse. If you were really proactive, that doesn't have to be the case. So I really want you to think about, what are you, or what could you do? What do you know that you should do? What have you learnt more about that you aren't putting into practice? So see what that is for you. The next thing I want to talk about is, why we often get stuck in that knowing phase. And I've gone through all of this before, so I'm speaking from a personal viewpoint as well, that I've done all of these things. Now, some of the common blocks that we find is that there's often a fear of failing, or doing it imperfectly. We want to have that A level. If we can't do it perfectly, then we're not going to do it at all. But I encourage you, do the messy C. Be a messy C student. Just start. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's that whole progress over perfection. Sometimes there's a feeling of overwhelm. There is so much that you need to do that you just get stuck in the place. You're frozen because you don't know where to start. That's really common as well. Then we've also got, as women, a guilt for putting ourselves first. That's a story that I've uncovered on the podcast a number of times. For so many women, we don't like to, fill up our own cup because we're too busy filling up everybody else's. And then there's also, if we make some big changes or we want to make some big shifts in our life, there's a whole identity confusion. Is this still me? Or maybe you're stuck where you are now and you go, this isn't me, I want to be somebody else, but I'm not sure what to do. I don't know how to begin. And sometimes we even wait until we feel completely ready. But as I said in the podcast episode, probably about 2 episodes ago, if not now, when? We don't always feel ready until we actually start. It's just taking that first step. So if I think about it again, I know my own example of what I've done in my own life around this area. If I just use a podcast, this actual podcast as an example, I had this idea, this grain that I thought, well, maybe I can start to talk about more, interview people, interview everyday women. I could have some health and wellness experts. I could have some of my own life lessons and what I've learnt myself and what I've learnt from mentoring others. Maybe I could put that all together and just cater it specifically for midlife women. So I started doing some podcast courses. I learned everything I could. I listened to podcasts about how you start podcasts. I got advice from my business mentor. I learned all I could about how I can actually produce and create a podcast. I knew what I had to do, but it was putting that into action that I had stuck. I was scared, releasing a podcast, knowing that there could be judgment from others. Who am I to do this? All of these things you go through. But I knew that podcast would only remain a concept and an idea. It's not going to become a reality if I didn't actually take a step and do something about it. So I broke it down into small bite-sized bits. What could I do to start working on creating this podcast and turning that into reality? And I did it. Little by little, I started putting things into place, and lo and behold, we're up to episode 134. So if I can do it, I know you can do it as well. So it's having that self-belief. It's taking that first little step and then the step after and the step after. So think about what it is that might be keeping you stuck in just the knowing phase and what you can do to start moving yourself out of it. Knowing doesn't change your life. Doing actually does. So just keep that in mind. The next thing I want to talk about is what happens when you actually start doing. Now, here's what I've seen in my own life and in the women that I work with. Action creates momentum. In my wellness membership, Better Than Before, I see this all the time. It's when the women take one small wellness step and then they take another and then another. They might have a large goal, they might have a small goal. Whatever their wellness goal is, they learn how to break it down and start taking those small little steps into action. And before long, they've got a brand new habit in place and they can start looking at other areas of their life. So I've seen that firsthand. I've also had women who have mentoring who have had a lot of trouble saying no to things and begin reclaiming time, setting those boundaries. So that's what happens when you start doing. If for you find that you're overwhelmed by this, too much on your plate, what is one thing that you could do? Start saying no to something and yes to something else. I want to think about another lady that I worked with in my mentoring. Now, and I could identify with her so much because she was in a job that she didn't particularly like. She was wanting to leave that particular career. She'd had enough. She'd outgrown it. It wasn't what she wanted anymore. And it was taking up a lot of her headspace. It was affecting her relationships with others. She wanted to leave, but nothing was going to change unless she actually did. So we worked out a way that she could put it into place, not do it as a, bang, I'm going to do it straight away and then be a bit regretful. It was a really intentional way of what she could start to do to put the wheels in motion so she could actually leave her job. And at the end of our 6 weeks, it was absolutely amazing. She had actually had a chat with her boss. She decided that she was going to be leaving her job and she moved away from that whole career that was a big part of her life, and it gave her that freedom to explore other areas that she's really been craving for so long. And that's really inspirational when you see people who actually take the step. They go from knowing what they should do to actually doing it. And when you start these sorts of things, you begin to feel different. When you start taking that action, you become encouraged about the momentum it's going to be causing, and you see that it's not as bad as sometimes what we imagine it's going to be. You move from more of that whole passive feeling to a really, probably a feeling of being empowered. So I've got a little gentle challenge for you right now. And it's a question. What's one thing you already know that you're finally ready to do? So I encourage you, pick something small, pick one small action, maybe one new habit you want to start, maybe having that one honest conversation. Now you might have a lot of things that come to mind that you want to do, but just start small, pick one. Or maybe you're at the other end and you've got no idea what you want to do. You're stuck. I encourage you, if that's you, give yourself some reflective time. Maybe you just need to journal. Maybe you need to meditate. Maybe just sit in nature, or perhaps start thinking about things when you're out walking or doing or gardening, whatever it might be for you. Because often we don't give ourselves that time and that space to think. But when you do, it's amazing what will come up for you. And I encourage you also, take that next step. Once you've thought about something that you can put into action, write that down, make a plan for how you're going to make it happen, and then stick to it. And what I've talked about in other episodes as well, find that accountability, because we can very easily, and hands up, I'm guilty of it as well. We can very easily say that we're going to do something and then find a reason or an excuse not to do it. So I encourage you to find an accountability person, whether it be a friend, your work colleague, your partner, whoever it is. Tell that person, because as soon as you tell it, it makes it more real, and then start taking action. Take those small little steps towards making something different happen in your life. So you don't need more time. You don't need to get it perfect. You just need to begin. And your whole next chapter, this whole midlife that we're talking about, this next half of life, it's created through your choices, not your intentions. We can think and wish our life away, but it's not going to change until we start doing things. And this really is your time to shine, not someday. Start doing it now. So if you are ready to move from knowing to the doing, and you want that little bit more support and structure and someone who's in your corner cheering you on, I'd love to invite you to book a free connection call with me. And we'll talk about where you're at and how my Reimagine mentoring program could support you. I'll pop the link in the show notes, or you can just head to my website to find out more. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to be back next week, but until then, remember, the better it gets, the better it gets. You're just getting started. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.